Hello, welcome everybody to our live crochet event. Happy spring to everybody. My name is Brenda KB Anderson. I'm a crochet designer and instructor, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make these adorable little chicks with bunny hats. Because sometimes when you crochet things, it doesn't have to be for a specific purpose except to entertain yourself and maybe make yourself laugh a little bit or cheer someone else up. These are very silly, these little projects, very silly. Very quick to make and really fun. I mean, there's one thing about making toys. I mean, I absolutely love making toys, whether it's knitting or crocheting or sewing, because at the end you end up with something that's three-dimensional and lovable and just makes you laugh, makes it, you know, it just kind of can brighten up your day. And it's just kind of amazing how you can literally just take some string and then give it personality. It's just always a little bit magical right at the end when you start everything starts coming together, you put the eyes on, and then you feel like you need to hug this thing that was just made out of string, basically. So these little guys, these are called the chick with bunny hats. And I'm going to be crocheting the chick first and then making the little bunny hat, and the bunny hats are removable just because it's extra silly. I just feel like it's extra fun. I asked my kids for advice on that and they're like, no, we don't sew it to its head. It needs to be, you need to be able to take it off. So if you prefer, you can sew the hat onto the head of the chick if you want to. But I prefer just to leave it so you can remove it as you like. So this project is almost a no-sew project. The sewing part comes in with the embroidery. So if you consider embroidery sewing, this is not a no-sew project, but the crocheting section of it is. You don't have to sew separate ears on, you don't have to sew the wings on. It's very straightforward. So this is, I would say, approachable for a beginner, maybe a slightly advanced beginner, only because there's just a couple little sections where you're going to be holding things a little bit awkwardly. Otherwise, it's very much a beginner project. We're just using very basic stitches. This is a great project to start out with, you know, if you want to make amigurumi. You've never done that before. Yeah, so this is very approachable. And of course, if you're a beginner, like a complete beginner, you've never crocheted before, it might be worth just sort of trying to practice with your hook and with the yarn for a little bit until you feel comfortable hanging onto the hook and to the project. Once you're comfortable with that, then you can absolutely do this project. All right, so first of all, I want to apologize. My voice is not back to normal. I've been sick for the last week and a half, and I completely lost my voice. So I had to cancel some of my live events. So if you're waiting for those, I have a live event that is all about color work, crochet color work, and then also a knitted bunny live event. Those are going to be coming up this Friday. But I wanted to do this one first just to test my voice out because this is a quicker project. I know I'm going to be talking a little bit less on this one. So bear with me. I'm sorry, my voice still sounds a little bit raspy, but I'm going to do my best here to make sure you guys know how to make these. All right, so let's talk about the materials. Oh, and also there is a free download. You can go ahead and download that and follow along. It's the entire pattern, the chick with bunny hat, full instructions. There's also picture tutorials in here in case you have, if you want to just refer to the pictures instead of coming back to watch the video again if you come to kind of a tricky little part and you can't quite remember. But I believe this video, you'll still be able to watch this video for at least a week. Maybe our people can pipe in here and how long that will be up. But the pattern will be available for free for as long as it, forever, basically. Okay, so we're going to talk about materials. So first of all, you're going to need to download your pattern. Second of all, we're going to need some yarn, right? So in this project, I am using this yarn. It's called beginner yarn. I did put a link to where I bought this. This was purchased on Amazon, so you can see what it looks like. You can see the texture of it. You do not need to use this exact yarn. You can use any kind of worsted weight yarn, a thickness that is similar to this type of yarn. If you don't know what worsted weight is, if you look on the ball band, there's usually like a number 4 on there. Well, for worsted weight it would be a number 4. It's a CYC number, so that tells you the thickness of the yarn, so you're looking for a number 4. This is a cotton tube-shaped yarn, and it makes it really easy, especially for beginner crocheters, to use this type of yarn because it makes really good stitch definition. You can really see all the little sections of each stitch, and it's easier to know where to put your hook. Also, it doesn't split. So that's why I chose this yarn, this particular yarn for this project. But if you just have some yarn in your stash at home and you're wondering if it'll work, yes, just use what you have. And of course, if you have like a bulky weight yarn or a thin yarn, as long as you change your hook so that the fabric that you're making is nice and dense and you are not going to be able to see holes between your stitches or anything like that, you can use any yarn you like, really. So you can kind of experiment with that, changing up your hook size just to make sure that you're going to have a nice firm gauge. You're not going to see the holes between the stitches, and that should be just fine. So you can use whatever yarn you want. Of course, you're going to need a hook, so your hook needs to go with the yarn size. As you start crocheting on this, I don't normally recommend people do a separate gauge swatch because what we're making is so tiny. I mean, this is basically like the size of a gauge swatch. You might as well just start making it and then looking at your fabric just to make sure that you're using the right hook for you. So for me, I am using a G hook, which is a 4mm hook. But for, there is no wrong size hook, you can't, as long as you're getting a nice dense fabric and you don't see the holes between your stitches, your hook is fine. Okay, so if you are crocheting along and you're kind of seeing spaces between your stitches, switch to a smaller hook, go down a size or 2 until you get a nice firm fabric. All right, so I'm going to be using my 4mm hook, and you're going to need some fiber fill. This is just like a polyester fiber fill. You can get this at the craft store. If you don't have that, but you have other little yarn ends or something, you can cut up your yarn ends into smaller lengths, like maybe 1-2 inches long, just chop it up, and then you can use that to stuff this project, if that's something that you already have and you don't want to go out and buy that. And then we're going to be needing some, I'm using a worsted weight dishcloth cotton for the orange parts here, so the little feet and the tiny little beak. Those are embroidered details that we're going to be adding onto this. And you can use embroidery thread or embroidery floss if you would prefer, and an embroidery needle, or you can use some sort of smoothish yarn, in an orange color that will look nice. Again, this is just a number 4. This is a dishcloth cotton. It's 100% cotton. But you can, if you have to go out and buy it, it might be less money if you just buy a skein of embroidery floss instead. So, and then you're going to need a couple of stitch markers to help you keep track of where you're at. And you'll need a yarn needle for weaving in your ends. And then you'll need, you'll either need an embroidery needle if you're using embroidery floss, or for me, I'm using, this to embroider my features, so I'm just going to be using that same yarn needle that I already had used. And the last thing you'll need are some safety eyes. So these are the safety eyes I'm going to be using. They're just little black safety eyes. These are 8mm. So I suggested in the pattern to use either 6mm or 8mm safety eyes because I think it makes a really good proportion size to the face. If you have something larger and you don't mind the eyes being bigger, you could certainly do that. Anything smaller than the 6mm, I'm a little concerned it's going to get lost through your stitches. But if we have a chance later when we're doing the eye instruction, if I feel like I have enough time, I'm going to go over how to make sure your eyes don't, if your backings are small or your eyes are small. I don't know if you guys have ever had this problem before, but if your eye could pull into your project or pop out of your project because of the space between your stitches, I'm going to be giving you a little tip on how to avoid that happening. So if you're worried about that, then I would say go for the 8mm eyes, safety eyes. So this is what the eyes look like, and then the safety eyes always come with a little plastic backing. So they may look a little different than these, but normally they have some sort of backing that has a wider surface and then a narrower surface, so kind of like a bell shape. There's lots of different types of backs. It's always the larger side, the larger circumference that you want to have on the back of your fabric, touching the wrong side of your fabric when you fasten it on. Okay, so you just need one set of those safety eyes. And yeah, that's it for materials. So pretty simple. I did want to mention too, if you are purchasing the same yarn that I bought from that link that I gave you, that yarn comes vacuum packed. It comes like a little yarn pancake. I've never seen this before with this type of yarn. And I was a little alarmed when I first got it, but I ripped it open and then let it sort of expand over a day or so, and it seems to be just fine. I didn't use it the day that I got it. I used it the next day, and it really crochets up to be the same looking as yarn that's fluffier. So here's the yarn that was squished in the vacuum sealed pack, and you can see it's still a little bit flat here, but once you crochet it up, it doesn't seem to make a difference. And this yarn was not like that when I bought it. So just a little heads up, in case you don't want that to happen, you might want to get a different, source your yarn differently than I did, but it didn't bother me. So I'm just letting you know, so there's no surprises. Okay, so we're gonna start out with the chick. We're gonna start out actually by making the wings first, because we're gonna incorporate the wings as we start working on the body, so that way we don't have to sew them on. So let's see. Oh, we've got Lorraine says, greetings from Westchester, New York. It's nice to see you back and hope you're feeling better. Thank you, Lorraine. That's so sweet. Yeah, I'm excited to be back. I was very frustrated because I've been feeling okay enough to do a live event, but I had no voice at all. So that would not have gone very well. It would have been like me miming with yarn, and that would have been bad. Okay, so I'm gonna flip open my pattern to where we're at. We're gonna be starting under the instructions, and if you printed this out, you can go ahead and follow along, or you can just follow along, with what I'm doing here and come back to it later after you've printed out your pattern. So we're gonna start out our wings by chaining 5. So we're gonna place a slip knot on our hook, and we're gonna make 5 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we're gonna work into the bottom of our chain. So if you look at your chain and it looks kind of like a braid or a bunch of V's stacked up, we're gonna roll those V's over till they're facing the table. And then you can see all these little horizontal dashes on the back of that chain. That's where you're gonna start working under when you work into your stitches. So we're gonna skip this very first horizontal dash, and we're gonna work into the second one. We're gonna do a single crochet there. So we're gonna insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. There's our first stitch. And then the next 3 chains, we're gonna work double crochet. So we yarn over, insert into the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And we're gonna do that 2 more times. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. One more time. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And there's our little wing, one little wing. So I'm just gonna cut that off and pull that through to fasten off. Okay, so you can go ahead and set that aside and make a second wing. I've already done that for us today. Here's my second wing, so you've got 2. Now they're ready to be placed onto the body. So we're gonna switch over to the body, and we're gonna start working that up. So we're gonna start here with an adjustable loop, and there's lots of different ways to make an adjustable loop. You can do it whatever way you're accustomed to. This is the way that I like to teach it though. Here's the cut end of my yarn. I'm just going to draw a little loop on the table like that. Then I'm gonna take this loop, I'm gonna flip it over until it's sitting on top of this strand right here. So I'm just flipping it over like that. And now I'm gonna put my hook underneath the strand in the middle, and I'm gonna place my finger where everything crosses over right there. Then I'm going to chain 1 to kind of anchor my yarn. And this is a little bit big and unwieldy, so I'm going to just pull on this beginning yarn tail to just kind of draw that loop in just a little. And then I do one additional thing. You can just start crocheting around here if you like, but I like to crochet over both strands, which is this way. So I'm just gonna take my loop and flip it, okay? So like just turning it over like this, okay? And now I can go ahead and start working into that ring. So I'm gonna do 6 single crochets into that ring. So insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. There's the first one. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now once you've done your 6, you can pull on that beginning yarn tail to tighten that up, close that hole. And then we don't have to do a join or anything. We're just gonna start by working in that very first single crochet, which is right here. And we're gonna do 2 single crochets into each stitch around. So this is round number 2. We're gonna work 2 single crochets into each of those stitches. So 1, 2. I'm gonna place a stitch marker in there so I can keep track of the beginning of my round. So that was the very first stitch that I did. And then 2 more into each of the next 5 stitches that are left here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's our 5th stitch that we worked into. So we should have a total of 12 stitches at this point, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we've just finished round number 2. Round number 3, we're gonna do 2 single crochets into the first stitch and then 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then we're gonna repeat that around. So 2 in the first stitch, 1 and 2. I'm gonna place that stitch marker back into that first stitch. 1 single crochet into the next stitch, 2 into the next, 1 and 2, 1 into the next, 2 into the next, 1 and 2, 1 into the next, 1 and 2, 1 into the next, 1 and 2, 1 into the next, 1 and 2, and 1 into the next. All right, so at this point, you should have a pretty good idea about how your fabric is gonna look. So just make sure that it's feeling pretty secure. There aren't, I can see little tiny holes between my stitches, and that's okay. But you don't want to see holes larger than this where you can, you just have to imagine once you stuff it, it's going to stretch those stitches a little bit, and you just don't want to see your stuffing between your stitches. So, so this is where you can kind of check like, oh, is this a good hook for me to be using with this particular yarn? If you see holes, use a smaller hook. If it's really hard for you to work into and it feels really tight, then you can use a larger hook. Okay, so let's see. Oh, Molly is saying, hey Brenda, what kind of yarn is used in your sweater? I don't know. This sweater is a thrifted sweater. There's a lot of chenille going on in here, and actually I love the sweater because it has all these different textures going on. I did not make the sweater, although I did make the buttons. I actually did like a Craftsy TikTok. Let me just pull this under here so you guys can see. These are like little dried flowers suspended in resin, and I did a little TikTok on Craftsy on how to add buttons to a sweater that doesn't have buttonholes. Like if you bought a sweater and it just has, an open front, which for me personally drives me crazy. I always want to close my sweater. I showed how to make these buttons, and then I also showed how you can add these giant snaps to the back, and then you can just snap it shut on behind the buttons. Anyway, that was a little bit random there. I don't really know too much about the yarn, but there's a lot of chenille yarn, and it likes to come popping out. That's one of the things I find frustrating about chenille yarn, is it likes to worm its way out and doesn't stay put very well. But I couldn't resist it because there's so many colors. Anyway, okay, let's go back to our pattern. So we've just finished up round number 3. And then at this point, I have a little note to weave in your beginning yarn tail because it's an easy time to do that. So you might think, why would I weave in my yarn tail? It's going to be on the inside of my toy. No one's ever going to see it. But if you don't weave it in, I feel like you're running the chance of that beginning loop opening up, and that you don't want that to happen later on. So I'm just going to go ahead and weave this in. And you have to make sure if you're using this type of tape yarn or this type of hollow knit tube yarn, you really need to have a blunt needle, because if you have a sharp needle, you might pierce through the tube and then you're not going to be able to weave it in very well if you're actually piercing through the tube. So just go in a couple of different directions. I feel like you just sort of need to scramble it up a little bit, make it confused so it doesn't know how it's going to unravel itself, and then we could just cut that off. All right. Or you could just leave it coiled up on the inside. It doesn't matter if you have a long yarn tail in there or not. All right, so here we are on round number 4. We're going to single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches, and then we're going to do 2 single crochets in the following stitch. So here's the first one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's our first 8 stitches, and now we're going to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch. So 1 and 2, and then we're going to repeat that again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 2 into the next stitch. 1 and 2. All right, so it's starting to kind of create a little bit of a bowl shape here because we did fewer increases on that round. And the next 2 rounds, we're just going to make a single crochet into each stitch around. So you'll just remove your stitch marker, place 1 single crochet there, put your stitch marker back in, and then you're going to work a single crochet into each stitch all the way around, and then repeat that again for the next round. So you're going to do this for rounds 5 and round 6. Okay, and once you do that, your piece will look like this. Okay, so it's a little bit of a taller bowl shape now. And then this is where we start to add the wings in. Okay, so we're going to single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches, and then we're going to add a wing. So I'm going to single crochet into, here's the first stitch, and I'm going to go ahead and mark that. So we've got 2 more stitches before the wing. And what I like to do, and you don't have to do this, but what I like to do is I like to add in the wing already. So I'm going to just place that wing right on top in front of my work, and I'm going to start crocheting around this strand here. Now, it doesn't really matter whether you have the wing going this way or you have the wing going this way. You can see there's a little bit of a difference between how the wings look if you look at the fronts of them or you look at the backs of them. They're a little bit more textured on the back side, and on the front side you can kind of see those little V's a little bit more. They kind of sit, they kind of turn a little bit to the surface. Now, it doesn't matter which way you put them on, but it is going to affect how they curl. They like to curl in the direction towards the right side. So if this is the top of the head and you want your wing to be curling up, then you're going to place it this way so you can see the wrong side of your wing. If you want your wings to curl down, then you can place it this way so that you're looking at the right side of your wing and it's going to curl down. So that's like a personal preference. You could do whichever way you like. Actually, in the pattern, I have you place it this way, and I've done it both ways. I just did that so that you wouldn't have to think which way to do it, just so that they would both be the same from one side to the other. But this is like a personal choice. I'm going to place mine on there so that you can see the wrong side of the wing, and the right side of the wing is going to be touching the head of the chick. Now I'm going to just start by, I only did 1 stitch so far, and we're going to do 2 more stitches. So when I'm doing those 2 stitches, you can either, if you're newer at this and you just want to go ahead and do those 2 stitches, it'll look like that. Then you're going to bring this forward and you're going to start crocheting into the wing. If you want a little extra credit or make things a little easier for yourself, you could just do 1 stitch here, and then you can lay this wing on top and just start crocheting over this yarn tail right here and into the stitch that you're working into. So there's the normal stitch we'd be working into, and we're just kind of crocheting around and trapping that little yarn tail. So 1, 2. So there's our total of, oops, I should let that yarn tail be on the inside. let me redo that part. We're going to lay that yarn tail to the back. All right, so we've got one stitch, and we're crocheting over the yarn tail just to make it a little easier for us to add that wing in. But you don't have to incorporate the yarn tail yet if you don't want to. So here's our first 3 single crochets, and then we're going to place that wing in front. I'm going to pull on this yarn tail a little. And see, that kind of helps hold it in place for us if we crochet over that yarn tail. So that's why I'm showing you this extra tip. You definitely don't need to do it that way. I'll show you on the next wing what happens if you don't do it that way. And now we're going to be working around this post. Oh, when we made these wings, you could place a stitch marker around that post. I actually have that in the instructions because I think it makes it easier for me to describe which post you're going to be working around. So in the instructions, you would have, on that very last double crochet, you would have put a yarn or a stitch marker around the post of that double crochet. I'm going to remove that now though. So that post you're going to be incorporating into the body of the chick. All right, so now we're going to insert our hook basically between this post and the next post. We're just sliding it through there, and then we're going to put it into the stitch we'd normally be working into. So you're going to slide it through there. And now we're going to do a single crochet. So we're going to pull up that loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And so that is grabbing that post and basically incorporating it into the body of the chick. So now we're going to do another stitch. So we're inserting our hook into the same space between those 2 posts right here. And we're going to go into the next stitch of the body or the head or whatever and grab that yarn over, pull through 2. And we're going to do that one more time. Same space between posts, and then we're going to go through that next stitch, grab that yarn, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And then, so now we've secured our wing to the body. Looks like this. And we're going to continue working into the next unworked stitch of the head. And I like to stitch over this yarn tail just for one stitch here. So we're going to be doing a total of, I think, 8 stitches. Let me just double check. Yep, so 8 stitches. So 8 single crochets. So beginning with this one, 1. And then I like to just bring this yarn tail and tuck it right in there, get it out of the way. So that was 1. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now we're going to bring the next wing over. So I'm going to place this here. And so this is what happens if you don't stitch over this before you get to the part where you're working around that post. You can just lay it right on top, go between those 2 posts with your hook. And then you're going to go into that next stitch and make a single crochet there. I'm going to bring that tail to the inside. There's my first single crochet. We're going to do 2 more. 1, and here's the second one. These are all worked through between that very last post and the previous post in the wing, and they're worked into each successive stitch of the body of the chick. Okay, so we have a total of 3 single crochets there. Those were worked into the next 3 stitches of the head, but they were all worked around that very last post. Okay, and then we're going to bring this to the inside. And then we're going to do a single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so see how our wing is nice and connected? We didn't stitch over that yarn tail in beginning. At the beginning, it does not matter. I just like to do that because it helps you like hold the wing in place as you're doing those stitches around the post. So it's up to you how you want to do that. All right, so now at this point, we're going to do, I think, 2 more rounds of single crochets. Yep, rounds 8 and 9 are just 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So there's our first stitch. And we're just going to do 1 single crochet into each stitch around. And here we are, those stitches that were worked around the wing. We're still just working into the tops of those stitches just like normal. You just work each stitch as they come up. So this is round 8. And we'll do one more round. So we'll remove that for a minute. All right, we have just a few more single crochets left. This is round number 9 here. We're finishing up. All right, so now before we start doing our decreases to shape the bottom of the chick, we are going to add those eyes in here. So this is the back of your chick where we were beginning and ending each of the rounds. As you can see, the wings are just slightly set to the back of the chick compared to the front. But that, you know, if you wanted your eyes to be at the front, you wanted your wings to be further forward, you could change that. I mean, that's the great thing about crochet is you can make things as you like them to be, and maybe experimenting a little bit with these amigurumis will be fun for you because you can get different expressions, slightly different looks to them. But when I designed this, I had shifted the wings slightly toward the back, so we'd have a little bit more of a belly in the front, a little more space to do the eyes and the beak. And we're going to be placing those between rounds number 6 and 7 with 3 stitches between them, okay? So what that means is, well, we just finished up, let's just turn it this way. We just finished up round number 9. So this was round number 9, 8, 7, and 6. So they're going to be between this row and this row, and we want to have 3 stitches between them. So we're going to place an eye here. We can always move it. And you've got 1, 2, 3. And here's the next one. Okay, so after you place those 2 eyes, you should see a hole here and a hole here. There should be 2 holes showing in between the eyes, okay? And the eyes are just ever so slightly above where those wings are. You can see here's the wing. If you follow that across, it's just kind of like the bottom border of the eye, if that makes sense, because this is upside down. So it goes like this. And now we're going to go ahead and place those backings. So I'm going to put one backing on, and then I'm going to show you what happens if you feel like, ooh, that is a stiff backing. Okay, that one's on there very secure. If you feel like your backing is going to be too small, or if you feel like your eyes are going to be too small and they're going to fall back inside, like if you're using really tiny safety eyes, sometimes this can happen. What I have done to deal with that, let's see, here we go, is I just use a little strand. You know, you can use a yarn tail or whatever, a little strand of yarn, and I find where that, you know, that space is where I want the eye to be inserted, and then I just stitch across in a couple of areas from one side to the other to basically make this a smaller hole here, if that makes sense. Like this. So that way your eye will not be able to pop through this way, or the backing won't be able to pop through that way. I wouldn't have that problem with the eyes and the backings that I'm using right now, but I have ordered, when you get little black safety eyes, sometimes the size of these, you know, like 6 millimeter, 8 millimeter, or, you know, smaller eyes, I have had this problem where, you know, it looks cute, the proportions look really nice with your amigurumi that you're making, but it doesn't want to stay put. But if you stitch back and forth around there, you are making it very tight. Like it can just, the post can come through where it is, but then anything that's larger, like the backing or the eye, won't be able to pop through. Let me see. Oh, there we go. These ones aren't making a very loud clicking noise, but usually you can kind of hear them. All right, that feels like it's on there, very secure. All right, so there's my little eyes. If you guys are interested in learning more about safety eyes, I did a whole live event where I show you all sorts of different types of safety eyes that I had found. There's lots and lots, there's a very wide variety. And I show you how the different styles of eyes work. So if you guys are interested in that, the Creative Crochet Corner website has another, like a whole live event all about safety eyes. Okay, let's see here. So now we're going to start round number 10. We're going to do an invisible decrease to start. So to do that, we're going to place our hook under just the front loop of the next stitch, and then under both loops of the following stitch. Then we're going to grab that yarn, pull it through the both loops of that stitch and the front loop of that stitch. And now you've got 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, and pull through 2. I'm going to place that back in place so I remember the beginning of my round. And then I'm going to single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now we're going to do another invisible decrease. So we're going to slide it underneath just that front loop, okay, not under both loops where we normally crochet, but just the front loop, and then under both loops of the following stitch. Grab that yarn, pull it under both loops, pull it under the front loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. Okay, so that made 2 stitches into 1 stitch, basically. We lost a stitch there. And now we're going to do single crochet into each of the next 8 stitches, which will bring us back to our stitch marker. All right, so round number 11, we're going to single crochet into the next stitch and then do an invisible decrease, and we're going to repeat that a total of 6 times. So I'll remove that for a minute, and we're going to do a single crochet here. Place that back. And an invisible decrease, so under the front loop, under both loops, grab that yarn, pull through. If there's a different way you like to do that decrease, the invisible decrease, I think most people go under the front loops of each of the next 2 stitches. I'll show you that in a minute. Most people do their invisible decreases that way. You can absolutely substitute with that. Okay, so there's a decrease, and then a single crochet into the next stitch, and here's another decrease. So most people go under the front loop, and then they pull it through and pull through. And that's a little easier to do. I find that this stitch gets pulled up a little bit more, so I prefer to do it the opposite way because it feels a little sturdier. But if you are just beginning and you're having a hard time getting your hook through, the way that I do it, definitely try this way. Okay, so there's your invisible decrease, and we're going to repeat that again. Single crochet, invisible decrease, single crochet, invisible decrease, single crochet, invisible decrease. You can see that the opening is getting smaller and smaller as we're doing these decreases. So if you feel like it's getting kind of tight and you want to start stuffing it at any point during this round, you can. So you'll just grab a little bit of your fiberfill stuffing and pop it in there. So I like to stuff things fairly firmly, not so firmly that it distorts the shape or that it starts stretching it out, but basically I stuff it until that's about to happen, and then I stop. Because it kind of gets compacted down over time, and it's really hard to add in more stuffing later. After you sew it all up. Or finish it up. Okay, so we finished with a decrease. Now we're going to do another single crochet. And here's our last decrease of the round. There we go. And now we have one more round, round number 12, and that's where we're going to decrease all the way around. So we're going to do that six times, or 6 invisible decreases. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's the 6th one. So we have a very small space left. We're going to go ahead and cut our yarn, leaving a little bit of a yarn tail here, just so that we have enough to kind of close this up. So we're going to thread that onto our yarn needle, and then we're going to go underneath just the front loop of each of the remaining 6 stitches. So I'm just kind of weaving it through that front loop, and once I get all the way around, then I can pull on it and tighten that up. Okay, so that closes that up. And I'm going to go ahead and weave this in. And I like to send my needle through the thickness of a stitch, because that really, instead of just pushing it behind all the stitches into the fiber fill, that doesn't feel like it's gonna, for sure stay, but I'm actually sliding this through the thickness of those stitches, and that's gonna cause a little more friction and keep that in place. So here's our little chick. So adorable, right? Okay, so we're gonna set that aside for now, and we're gonna work on the little bunny hat. And then we'll come back to that in a little bit to do the embroidery. Okay, so to start out on the bunny hat, we're gonna start with the ears. So we're actually making 2 ears that are connected together, and then we're gonna incorporate that into the hat, so that way we don't have to sew them on. So we're gonna start out by chaining 6 stitches. So we're gonna place a slip knot on our hook, and we're gonna chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, if you can see all those little V's all stacked up, that's the top of your chain. You're gonna roll that so it's touching the table, and then you can see the bottom of your chain where all those little horizontal dashes are. That's where we're gonna work. So we're gonna skip the very first horizontal dash, which is right here by my thumb, and then we're gonna make a single crochet into the next one. So single crochet here. And then we're gonna do a double crochet in the next one. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. There's our double crochet. We're gonna do one more double crochet, yarn over, insert into the next chain, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So far we have single crochet, double crochet, double crochet. We've got 2 chains left. We're gonna do a single crochet here, and then we're gonna do a slip stitch. So we're just gonna insert our hook into that very last chain, grab that yarn, pull through the loop on our hook. And we've made one little tiny bunny ear, okay? And now we are going to chain 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now we're gonna repeat a section of what we just did. We're gonna basically make one more ear, but over here. So we're gonna work into the bottom of the chain. We're skipping that first chain from the hook. We're gonna work a single crochet under the second chain right here. Then we're gonna do a double crochet into the next chain, a double crochet into the next chain, a single crochet into the next chain, and a slip stitch into the following chain right here. Okay, so there's our second ear. And now we can go ahead and just cut that off and pull through to fasten off. Okay, so this is what we have right now. We've got 2 little bunny ears, and then there's a little chain that connects them. All right, we're going to set that aside just for now while we work on the hat. And we're going to start out our hat just like we started out the top of that chick. So we're going to draw our loop, flip it over onto the strand that's connected to the ball, place our hook underneath that, and then we're going to chain 1. So this is all the way that I like to make my adjustable loop. There's lots of ways to do it. We have other ways on the website, on the Creative Crochet Corner website, if you'd like to look at some other ways to do it. And then I like to take my loop and just flip it like this, turn it like that. Now I'm going to do 6 single crochets into that loop. So this is just like the top of the chick. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now we're going to tighten that up, just like that. And now for round number 2, we're going to incorporate our bunny ears, okay? So this part gets a little bit wordy in the pattern, but I do have some pictures. But basically what we're doing is we're going to be working 2 single crochets into each single crochet around. I'm just going to grab a little water here. And as we do that, we're going to start in one section of it, we're going to be crocheting around the chain that sits between those 2 ears. Okay, so let me see here. So this would be round number 2. And in it, I just wanted to show you, I have these little pictures so you can see what I'm doing. Little picture tutorial, because I know this part is a little bit unusual, especially for someone who hasn't crocheted a lot of amigurumi. This is an unusual technique. Okay, so we're going to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch. Okay, so this is the very first stitch of my round, so we're going to do 2 single crochets here. So 1 and 2. Okay, I'm going to place my stitch marker in the very first stitch of this round. And you know, if you, again, like when we added the wings before, you could, those very 2 stitches of the round, you could start by crocheting them over this yarn tail if that's helpful to you. I'm going to skip that because I feel like this one's just a little trickier and I want to be able to show you what I'm really doing. So the next 3 stitches, so here, here, and here. So these 3 stitches in my piece, I'm going to be working 2 stitches into each of those 3 stitches. And the thing that makes this a little bit different is that we're going to place this chain right in front of our work, and we're going to do 2 stitches here, 2 stitches here, 2 stitches here as we're working around that chain. Okay, so I'm placing that in front, and I'm going to go underneath this chain right here, the chain between the 2 ears, and I'm going to make a single crochet into that very next stitch of my round. And by doing that, I'm trapping that little chain between the ears in place, okay? So now that we've got that attached, it gets a little easier. So I'm going to go back in that same space because we're doing 2 stitches into that stitch. And then we're going to move to the next stitch. So the next stitch is right here. But again, we're going to be trapping that chain between the ears in place. So you just put it right in front. Okay, there's the very next stitch. Here's the chain that's attached to my ear. And we're just going to be trapping that in place. So 1 single crochet and 2 single crochets. All right, we're going to do that one more time. So here's the next stitch in my round right there. But we're going to have this chain just sort of sitting in front of it. And we're going to trap that in place. 1 and 2. Okay. So now we've incorporated our 2 little ears. And we're going to work into the next stitch of that round, and we're going to do 2 single crochets into there. I'm actually going to be crocheting over this yarn tail. This is the yarn tail from the ears, and I'm just going to continue crocheting over that. You don't have to. You can weave that in later if you like. So I'm going to crochet do 2 single crochets in the next stitch and 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1 and 2. Okay, so we've made it all the way around. So on the next round, we're going to do 2 single crochets in the next, 1 in the next, and we're going to do that a total of 6 times. So I'm going to remove that stitch marker at the beginning of the round, and we're going to do 2 single crochets in this stitch, 1 and 2. And if you want to, you can incorporate this beginning yarn tail so you have less to weave in later by just kind of laying that across and just stitching around it. So here's our next single crochet into the next stitch. We just trapped that yarn tail. You don't have to. You can just sew it in later if you'd rather. And then here's our next stitch. So you're not going to be working into those ears. You just have to kind of push them out of the way. 2 in the next. 1 and 2. 1 in the next. 2 in the next. 1 and 2. And 1 in the next. 2 in the next. 1 and 2. 1 in the next. 2 in the next. 1 and 2. And 1 in the next. 2 in the next. 1 and 2. And 1 in the next. All right, now we've made it to the end of our round. I should have put my stitch marker back in, but that's the very beginning of the round is the next stitch. And then round number 4, we're going to do a single crochet into the next 3 stitches, and then 2 single crochets into the following stitch. Then we're going to single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, and 2 in the following stitch. So we'll do 1 in the next, place that back in there. So that's 1, 2, that's in its own stitch, 3, that's in its own stitch, and then we have 2 in the next stitch, 1 and 2. Now we're going to do 4 single crochets before we do an increase. An increase is just where you have 2 stitches into 1 stitch. Oh, we've got a hello from Denmark. Hello, thanks for saying hi. I always love to hear where you guys are hanging out, where you guys are crocheting from and watching from. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 single crochets. And then we're going to do 2 in the next stitch, 1 and 2. Now we're going to repeat that entire sequence once more. So 1 single crochet into each of the next 3. So that would be 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to do 2 single crochets into the following stitch. 1 and 2, and now we're going to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 single crochets into the very last stitch. 1 and 2. All right, and we finished all of our increasing. We're just going to do one round where we work 1 single crochet into each stitch of the round. So we'll just remove that and place that back in. And then we'll do a single crochet into each stitch all the way around. I'll just skip to my next sample here because I've already done that. And we finished off, let me see. Actually, I'm not going to skip to this because I feel like I still have a few more stitches left to do on that and I don't want to count them. So I'm just going to go around until I get to that very last stitch of the round. And this should make it into a little bit more of a bowl shape. And this has slightly higher stitch count compared to the chick, so it should fit over on top of your chick. It's just a tiny bit bigger. And if you wanted to make the hat a little longer, honestly, it might stay on its head a little better if you did one more round, but I thought it looked cuter with this length, so I just fastened it off here. But you could do one more round if you wanted to. So I've finished with round number 5. That's the end of my round, so we're going to fasten off. So I'm going to cut my yarn, and I like to do an invisible join at the end of my round when I have something where I fasten off here, especially on a tiny little amigurumi. So I'm going to show you how to do that, but you can do this however you like. You could do it slip stitch here and just pull it through and weave it in. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and just pull on that loop, and then I'm going to thread this onto my yarn needle. Let's see, where did I put my, oh, they're all ending up under my pattern over here, hiding. Okay. So to do an invisible join, I'm going to skip the very first stitch of the round, which is right here, and I'm going to go underneath from front to back under the following stitch. And I'm going to pull on this until this distance here is about the size of a stitch, like that. Then I'm going to go back down in where this yarn came from in that little section and come out at the back of the work. And now I'm going to pull on this. This loop got a little bit stretched out here. You can see it looks longer than a stitch. I'm going to pull on it until it matches the other stitch sizes, and then you can see how it just blends right in. There's no jog there anymore. And then we could go ahead and just weave in our yarn tails. Okay, so you're going to want to do, again, go in a couple of directions, weave them in, and then trim them off. And you can do the same with all of these yarn tails. These came from the ears, and it came from the very beginning of the hat. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to the last section here so you guys can see how to do the embroidery. And let's see. Okay, so to make the beak, all the beak is just a couple little tiny stitches. I'm just threading my yarn onto a yarn needle. If you have embroidery floss, you'll just thread it onto an embroidery needle. And I always like to start somewhere in the back and just put my needle in and try to slide my needle through the thickness of a stitch without letting your yarn show. Okay, so I can feel that it's going through the backs of these stitches right here. So that's going to kind of anchor it. And I'm going to do this with just one strand at a time. If you're using embroidery floss, you may decide to use it doubled, just so it's a little bit thicker. So I'm going to pull that in. I'm going to just leave this hanging out at the underneath the wing for right now until I get this woven in. So I'm going to go in a couple of directions. I'm kind of like pre-weaving in my end before I even do my embroidery, and I can feel that that feels pretty sturdy. I'm going to go one more. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to slide it through the thickness of these stitches in a couple of directions, and that's going to keep it in place. Now I can feel that's really secure, and I can go ahead and just cut this off. I'm going to pull on it just a little bit so it'll disappear. Once I cut it, now it's gone. Okay, so now I'm going to go up through here, and I'm going to make a tiny little beak right between the eyes. So right here, there are those two little holes between the eyes, and that's where we're going to be creating our beak. So when we make these stitches, we want to make them kind of loose. Not so loose that they're just, not that you don't want anything to get caught in it, but you do not want to pull these tight at all, because if you do that, it's going to make the holes right next to the edges of the beak. It's going to make that hole bigger. All right, so you can do just 2 stitches if you want, or if you feel like you need a little more, want it to be a little more pronounced, you can do a 3rd one. You just kind of want those stitches to land on top of each other, like that. I'll do one more. And then I'm going to come out down here on the bottom, and then I'm going to show you how to make the feet. So if you guys have any remaining questions, try to get those in so I can answer that for you during this live event, because I'm just about done here. So there's my little beak. And now I'm going to create the feet. So the feet are made by making little lazy daisy stitches, but not the whole daisy. Okay, it's just like a little portion of it. So if you've never done that before, that's okay. I'm going to show you how to do it. So you want to come out somewhere close to the bottom of, like here's the center of my chick right here. So this is the first round of stitches. There's the second round. So somewhere between the second and third round is usually where I start my foot. Just depends on how big you want these feet to be. I like them to show a little bit on the front though. You know, like when you're looking at them, I like them to kind of stick up a little bit. So I'm going to start right here. And I'm placing my needle right back into the same place as where it came out. And then I'm going to push my needle out somewhere up above, and I'm going to be making 3 little lines. So one should go slightly this direction, one should go straight up kind of towards the eye, and one should go slightly in this direction, okay? So like this, this, this. Just kind of picture them radiating out. So we're going to place our needle like maybe 2 rounds up. I'm going to wrap that yarn around here. And so that way when we pull on this, that is going to catch that loop. So again, you want to be really gentle with this and don't pull hard. So there's our first little toe. We're going to go back down in here, and we're going to come out right in that same place where we were before. All right, so there's our first little toe. Now we're going to do another one. So we're going to place our needle right in the same place, come up right next to it, or like 1 stitch over. I'm going to bring the yarn around. It doesn't matter if you go this way or this way. But see, when I look at this and I go this way, it looks like it might, well, actually that looks pretty okay. To me, on this one, it just looks a little better if I go this way, because it's not going to cover up as much of this toe, if that makes sense. It doesn't really matter which way you wrap it for this project. So you're going to gently pull on that, let that yarn catch the tip of the toe, like that, and then you're going to go right back down, right next to it, and come out in the same place. So there's the second toe. And we're going to come over 1 stitch over. There's our third toe. And then we'll go back in. And I'm going to skip over here. Let's see. I kind of want my next foot to come out ever so slightly further this way. I'm going to try to come out here. There we go. So here's going to be my next foot. So I'm going to make 3 more toes. There we go. There's 1. Coming out the same place. Oops. There's 1, and now we'll do 2 more. Oh, Lorraine's got an idea. You could add pink pipe cleaner into each ear, then place the other bottom end into the head. Oh, yeah, to make the ears stand up straight and have that cute little pink inside of the ears. That's a really great idea. That would be very cute. That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that, Lorraine. I also want to mention, too, if you don't like how the ears kind of want to curl, I thought that was super cute when they're kind of curly. But if you do steam it, if you lay it on a board, put some pins in it and you steam it, it'll straighten out the curling that'll happen. You can also straighten out the curling that happens on the wings too, in that way, if you want to steam block it. So if that's something that bothers you. Or, of course, you could put a pink pipe cleaner in like Lorraine is suggesting, which would add that super cute little fuzzy pink bit to the inside of the ear, which would be really cute. All right, and here is my very last toe. Just adding that last little part. And then again, we're gonna have to weave in this end. I know it's tempting to just sort of shove it into the inside of the toy, but you know, especially if a kid is gonna play with this or if people are gonna be handling it, you really wanna take the extra like 20 seconds it takes to just kind of weave in that end. I can feel it's getting stuck in those stitches, and that's what you want, because that's gonna help create that kind of friction that's gonna keep everything in place. And it'll keep your ends from popping out later. I can still see that little orange bit there, so I'm gonna try and pull that out. There we go. And there it is. Look at those cute little feet. And then we can put the little hat on. And it looks so adorable, you guys. This is such a silly little project. You know, sometimes I make these things and I think, you know, this is not a very practical thing to do, Brenda. But you know what? Sometimes just cheering yourself up or cheering someone else up or doing something just because it's fun, I feel like there is value in that. So I say go to town and make a whole bunch of these little chicks and bunny hats and give them out to your friends, your family, little kids, or adults even. They're certainly will be appreciated because they're just so adorable. They're so very cute. And they don't take that long to make either. And I also meant to mention this too. If you get these 2 little skeins of yarn, you can make at least 3. I think probably 4, but I don't want to say that and have you run out of yarn. But you can make at least 3 sets of these little chicks with hats. So. All right, looks like I've answered all my questions. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And then if you guys are into knitting or you want to watch another toy making tutorial, on Friday I'm going to be teaching how to make this little bunny. This is a knitted project. And so this is going to be on Friday. Also, for those of you who are interested in crochet color work, I'm going to be teaching a live event all about different styles of crochet color work. It's just sort of like a show and tell and explaining the different styles of color work and why you would use one versus another, what they're good at, if they have any drawbacks, that sort of thing too. So that's also on Friday. So I hope to see you guys there. All right, thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.